Hello everyone, Sam here. How are you all doing? Now, in this video, I'm talking about how trying to force recovery is like somebody pointing a gun at your head whilst trying to figure out a Rubik's Cube, whilst trying to complete a Rubik's Cube. Okay, and that's how it can feel. So all the sensations, all the panic, all the anxiety will be very intense. It'll be through the roof. It will be very chronic, okay? Now, you trying to force recovery is like you trying to figure it out, trying to get an answer while somebody's got a gun to your head. It's not going to quite work like that because all the sensations, all the symptoms are going to be very, very intense and very, very severe, okay? What I often advise people is that whilst those symptoms are very severe, and that could happen for a very, very long time on this journey, you have to just focus on the things that is in your control, okay? And that is the compulsions that you're currently doing, the compulsions that you're choosing to do. Yes, they can feel like you have no choice, but that's how it feels. You have to try and break free from that cycle. You have to try and cut compulsions as much as you can in order to get to recovery. But initially, all you can focus on right now is what compulsions am I doing? What am I avoiding? Am I seeking reassurance? Am I putting things off? Am I venting? Am I complaining? Am I whining? Am I doing things for relief? Am I escaping discomfort? Am I trying to get rid of a feeling? Okay, am I avoiding potential triggers? Okay, so in regards to that, those are the compulsions that need to be focused on being erased. Now, also focus on, well, why am I triggered? So why are the sensations so severe? Why is the anxiety so high? Okay, yes, at times it can feel like they're very high for no reason. I had that for so long. I just felt anxious for no particular reason. Was frustrating. But when I really ripped that apart and stripped it back to basics, there's always an underlying fear bubbling away, fueling it all, the catalyst of it all, whether that's fear of fear, whether that's the chronic guilt lingering in the background, so there's something that you're writing yourself off, you're rating yourself, there's something that you can't accept, whether that's yourself, whether that's somebody else, whether that's life in general. Okay, there's always something bubbling away, fueling that fear cycle. Okay, and this Rubik's Cube analogy is very good because it also shows you what suffering with OCD is like in a way. Because when I was stuck with chronic guilt and chronic anxiety and chronic shame, and when I was with panic, when I was panicking all the time, panic disorder, when I was stuck with that, it was like, come on, solve this Rubik's Cube, or someone had a gun to my head and they were going to fire at any moment, okay? Now, Rob always says, and I love this quote, this is a good analogy for OCD suffering, trying to relax with OCD is like laying in the bath with someone burgling the house downstairs. So you're upstairs in the bath, and someone is downstairs burgling the house. Now, that's not obviously going to work. You're not going to be able to relax, okay? Now, I think there's another one where I've been in a room and the tiger's chained to the corner. I can't quite remember, but I think Rol's mentioned it before. And that's what it's like because you simply can't relax with OCD, right? We can try and force it, but it will not because there's something firing. Boom, boom, boom. There's a danger. There's your life is in jeopardy. Your future is in jeopardy. Right, and what OCD is doing there, it's looking for a fear, it's completely blowing that fear up and going, right, this needs immediate attention right now. Let's say you have a fear of doing wrong. So what it's going to do is go, right, you've done wrong in the past, you may have done wrong in the past, you need to figure this out right now, otherwise you're going to be bombarded by those sensations, intense anxiety, panic, guilt, panicking all the time, 24/7, okay? Now, look at it like this, if you're trying to force recovery, if you're trying to force it, if you're trying to absolutely nail it down right now, yet again, with all the symptoms through the roof, of all the sensations drumming away and going crazy and increasing and decreasing, increasing again, if you try and force recovery, i.e. no chronic guilt, no chronic anxiety, the intrusive thoughts have lost their intrusiveness to a stage where you can't even tell if you've got OCD or not, that won't just happen as you force it. Okay, and yet again, that links to somebody pointing a gun at your head and you're trying to solve a Rubik's Cube. It's not quite going to work because there is still something firing. And the reason that's firing, the reason that emotionally charged disturbance is firing is because of a belief. It's because of a fear that you've yet to break down. It's because maybe you're avoiding things and that is prolonging the fear because OCD, it fires, it misfires because you avoiding that is prolonging that fear in the future. Okay, you putting something else off It's showing your brain that that's a genuine threat, and then it sounds the alarm, okay? It's the same if I throw a brick at your head and the way you move out the way, you duck out the way to save your life, okay? Because that panic and that anxiety response is designed to save your life, and it's the same with us, right? But the fight or flight response of us is obviously faulty, because you don't have to get technical with this. I'm just giving you some advice, I'm giving you some explanation of what's happening, but that's misfiring. So when, for example, any slight risk, so let's say you have any fear of being stuck or fear of your life being ruined, as soon as some OCD finds something to put that into jeopardy, which is going to find, that's then going to fire. So that fight or flight response will fire. It's the same if I fell off this chair now, and before I hit the ground, that heart sinking feeling, that panic feeling, that feeling designed to save your life and for me to act urgently to get myself out of that situation, that's then firing. And that's what it's like when you're triggered. Because when you're triggered, you go into that fight or flight response. You go into that life or death response. I need to get rid of this. I need to get rid of this. And that is obviously very uncomfortable. And this is why I talk about tuning down the catastrophizing. Because as we tune that down, as we turn the volume down, the catastrophizing volume down, then that then brings down the catastrophic response. It brings down the fight or flight, the life-saving response that your brain's firing. Okay, and if you can look at it like that, it don't have to get technical. You don't have to know the ins and outs of what's going on in the brain. You don't really need to know. It's nice to have an understanding. It's nice to know how it's operating. It's nice to have some knowledge. But ultimately, to overcome that and to recover, it's looking at what is fueling that response. What are you doing today which is fueling that response? So the irrational beliefs that you're holding, your reluctancy to accept the worst case scenario, the constant self-rating, the self-downing, the low frustration tolerance, the catastrophizing, the rigid demands, the compulsions that you're still partaking in. All of that is a mix of ingredients which is fueling that response. Okay, view it as just like the fire is burning, and all the things that you do, with the avoidance and the compulsions, and when you're going back to your black and white rigid thinking, or you're currently holding on to the black and white rigid thinking, that is just fueling that response in the brain. Okay, so for example, let's say you're walking in the street and you have the urge to suddenly push somebody, right? Now, obviously, OCD then lashes to the belief that you cannot possibly do wrong, that you cannot have ever acted immorally, you couldn't even have had that thought, and if you have, then you are the worst person ever, because OCD is always going to convince you that you are the worst person on this planet. You are the most sick, the most twisted, the most horrible, the most evil person on this planet. That is what OCD will convince you of. So let's say you're walking down the street and you get the urge to push somebody. Now, obviously, the compulsion would be then to put your hands in your pocket and then to avoid, or maybe to cross the road or whatever, or to I used to put my hands in my pocket and also put the zips shut. So I was obviously fitting my hands in, but I was like, I cannot ever put my hands out in my pocket. What if they push somebody? What if I touch somebody? What if I barge somebody? So I then did the compulsion of trapping my hands away. Obviously wasn't working, and obviously very compulsive, okay? And that's just the extreme compulsion with that. And worst of all, I then avoided things like that. I avoided even going out, walking in public. I'd crossing the road all the time and so on. But what I'm saying there is that, to go back to what I'm saying in this video, is that the reason that triggers you is because there is an underlying belief that if I have done anything slightly wrong, slightly immoral, I am sick, I am twisted, I am evil, I am a monster, right? Now, because you are catastrophizing that, because of those kind of beliefs that you're holding, those very rigid beliefs that you're holding, those very self-defeating, those self-punishing beliefs that you're holding, OCD takes a grip from that, and then because of that belief, it then fuels that triggered response. It fuels that life or death response. It fuels that all or nothing response, where in the moment, the anxiety symptoms and all the intense feelings and the sensations that anxiety and OCD brings, that goes through the roof, okay? And that is when that life or death, that falling off your chair feeling, that you led in the bath and somebody burgling your house downstairs, that kind of feeling, right? That panic. And this is where it can be hard to concentrate for OCD sufferers, because let's say you're trying to read a book, or let's say you're trying to study for an exam, and then it's, but internally it feels like you're drowning. Like the swan analogy, where the swan looks calm on the surface of the water, but deep down the legs are going crazy, right? And that's how it's often going to feel with OCD suffering and anxiety cycles, because it feels like you're drowning internally, but on the surface everything seems okay. But when you're living in that cycle, when you're experiencing that yourself, and you all know that too well watching this video, let's say you're trying to read a book, you're trying to study for an exam, we feel like you won't be able to concentrate because it's firing all day long, right? So we need to try and tune that down, bring it down just to a healthy concern, so to healthy feelings, and that comes with rational beliefs, that comes with disputing irrational beliefs, that comes with looking at worst case scenario, making peace with that, going towards that, instead of writing ourselves off completely, having more compassion and acceptance of ourselves, even if the worst case was true. Not saying it is true, but even if the worst case was true, and ultimately not avoiding things. So not avoiding walking in the street, not avoiding things that are slightly related to the fear, because that then just fuels that compulsive cycle and ultimately pours fuel on the OCD fire. Okay, and that's what's happening there. Okay, so to reiterate, trying to force recovery, trying to get rid of anxiety, okay, trying to do things while suffering, that is very, very important. We have to bring it for the ride. We have to let it be there. But remember, it is going to feel like somebody's got a gun to your head whilst you're trying to solve a Rubik's Cube. Okay, that's how it's going to feel, because in that moment you're desperate. In that moment you're so set on getting some kind of answer, some kind of relief, some kind of certainty. Is going to be very frantic. It's going to be running like an headless chicken. It's going to be solving this Rubik's Cube whilst the pressure's on, right? And that is how life and death is going to feel. Okay, so I think that's important to remember. You've got to view things like, well, these sensations, they're going to be there. Okay, stop trying to outrun these sensations. Stop trying to forcefully solve that Rubik's Cube. Okay, that takes time, right? If you're in a position where you were trying to solve a Rubik's Cube with someone with a gun to your head, you trying to practically solve it isn't going to fix, because if anything, you're not going to be able to solve it, are you? Because by the time you're panicking, then they probably would have pulled the trigger. Okay, so what I'm saying is that if we gradually take our time as the recovery journey, it's going to take a bit long process. It's going to take patience. It's going to take persistence. It's going to take consistency. Okay, and just gradually take your time, chipping away, working on solving that Rubik's Cube, solving that puzzle, even whilst the symptoms are firing, even whilst that life or death situation is ever present. And that's how it's going to feel. Okay, because as soon as we then go, oh my God, I need to solve this right now, that then fuels that cycle. It then fuels that urgent cycle. I need to get a fix right now, or that's not going to work. And all that's going to do is make you feel very, very lost, very hopeless, very demotivated, and you're going to feel trapped, aren't you? You're going to feel like you're trying to escape a maze and the doors are closing everywhere you look. And that's how it's going to feel. Okay, so I hope that helps. Hope that gives a bit of explanation of what's going on. And just really think about those points, because they are so, so important. Now, if you enjoyed this video, please leave a like. I'm Sam. We've got Nick, Rob, Momin, and Gemma on this team. Do coaching calls. If you're interested in one-to-one calls where we can look at your specific fears, look at your specific irrational beliefs, your compulsions, set exposures, see how you're trying to solve the Rubik's Cube quite frantically, please email phil@ocdrecovery.com and we can start your recovery journey as soon as possible. Anyway, you take care, look after yourself, and we'll speak again. Bye-bye.